Yeah, I think it's a term
So
called the
yeah,
forever war, where it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, we've been in, what was it, Afghanistan for probably longer than I've been alive, which is pretty concerning, to say the least.
There's a lot of things we have to kind of give up in times of war, and we haven't really been giving up those things with Iraq and Afghanistan. And people, they live their lives. They don't feel like they're a country at war, not in the sense that they did during World War II. And this was somewhat true during Vietnam. During Vietnam, we at least had the draft, and that kind of like put it in people's consciousness. But kind of like the day-to-day, economy, especially now, it doesn't feel like a war economy. It just feels like an economy, and then one of the things we do is we go to war or we fight wars, that kind of thing. So I think if we had a basic income in place, that alone would make it more explicit that people are giving something up in order for us to go to war, because we actually have to pull resources away from the normal domestic consumer economy, instead of just having a permanently shrunken or uh, below capacity consumer economy, and then just doing this war thing as an extra thing. The war thing would actually feel like a cost. So I think right now, you don't have to tax in order to go to war. You can just borrow a ton. And that's because we've got the extra resources to do it, because we're not benefiting consumers to the fullest extent possible.
there seems to be this desire to make sure that the on the author, the part of the author, to make sure that the civilians properly kind of feel the cost of war, which they're not feeling. What's interesting about that is that it seems that there's been a kind of developmental process wherein we've mastered the art of doing precisely the opposite. We've started to get really good at keeping the war industry growing and sustainable, and actually not taking off too much of the private consumer sector. And so if you can look at the modern wars, they sort of solved that problem. We can use this type of war against a low level adversary, right? And we can now keep up a constant um, war labor program that's simultaneously kind of pumping money into the economy without taking too much of it. If you look at past wars, in the old days, this was much more difficult. We hadn't figured out how to do this. And so the civilian population would be much more destitute. Compare the Civil War and the early World Wars, where there was a lot of inflation, right? Now we don't have that, because we figured out exactly how not to do what the author's suggesting, which is make the civilian population feel the pain of that. But at the same time, this is only possible because we're not doing the best that we can to maximize benefit to the consumer economy. It's going into war production, or it's not being used.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's also true to some extent that part of the reason we're able to get away with this is that we're keeping our people permanently destitute, or more destitute than they otherwise would be. And the reason we don't see the costs of war, or a big part of it, is because we aren't allowing ourselves to see the benefits of peace. Yeah.